Hello, it's Scott Manley here, and today I want to introduce you to all the new probe components that have been added to Kerbal Space Program 0.18. Now, essentially the probes are just very simple capsules. They don't have any space for any pilots, so they are unmanned. They're very light, and because they're very light, you can do a whole bunch of stuff with them that you can't do with a regular capsule. So let's start with Stay Putnik, and of course, we need to come up with a name for this, and Tony seems like a great name, or perhaps we could have his brother Alan probe, for anyone that remembers the amateur surgeon games. So this probe masses 0.05, which is 1/16 of the mass of the smallest regular capsule in the game. Now there's some very tiny parts that go with them. You have the LV-1 fuel engine, which has a tiny mass. There's the Oscar B fuel tank. This is a fuel tank which has, again, it's very, very light, and it has an amount of fuel that is, well, pretty darn tiny. It's a backup more than anything. You have these radially mounted engines, which you've seen already in action, and there's also the Toroidal fuel tank, which makes a nice addition in terms of extra fuel. If we bring this around, we can stick this in here and try flying this thing again. I realized there was an error in my previous model where the engine ended up sitting underneath the launch pad, but we should have energy here. Nope. Oh, there, look, we've got just enough energy here. Oh, Alan probe. What's up with you and your silly flying around things? Well, that didn't work too well. Let's go back to the vehicle assembly building. So, yeah, that's one of the options. Obviously, the radial mount engines are a whole lot more powerful, but, you know, nobody cares about that. Well, I'm not saying that nobody cares about it. The main thing that people are interested in, or the main new propulsion system, is the ion drive, the ion propulsion system. Now, if you look at this has a specific impulse of 4200, which is like almost 5 times, just over 5 times the best thing we already have. The nuclear engine has 800, so this has 5 and a quarter times that. That means it also has about 10 times, over 10 times the efficiency of a regular engine. Now, this also requires 2 new fuel types. It requires xenon gas, which in real life is an inert noble gas, which is very useful in these kind of applications because it doesn't react with the engine, because the engine is using electricity. It's very chemically reactive, so you don't want to be using oxygen. It also uses electric charge. Now, if you look at the spacecraft in the configuration, it tells you that it has electric charge of 5. And if we look at this, it requires 12, and that's 12 per second. So this thing would run out of electric charge in less than half a second. And that's why you need the whole electric power system. So one option is the battery. Let's take a look at the batteries. Batteries, you can stick those on the side. They contain 100 charge units each, so they'll keep it going for about 8 seconds. Not very good, especially considering the mass is, you know, not insignificant. There's a slightly larger battery, which will contain 500 units of charge. Again, won't last very long. What you really want is something to generate the power. And there's 2 ways to generate the power. The first is the nuclear engine, the nuclear isotope engine, and that generates it says 60 per minute, so that is 1 per second. So you need 12 of these to power the ion thruster. And of course, what we're really talking about for this is solar power. Now, we have the Gigantor solar power array, which generates 14 units of electric charge per second. That's pretty good. And then there are 5 other sets of solar panels. One is a very simple static solar panel that exists like that. It just slaps it onto the side, and you know, if I take this one off, let's take it off, we can arrange a bunch of them around. Come on, there we go. Grab that, grab it, there we go. And it doesn't want to get on there. typical. There we go, stick 6 of these around, and so these generate 0.75 charge per second, so you're going to need 16 of these to power to power an ion drive. And you're going to run out of space on these tiny space probes, so that's why you use the fold-out arrays. Now if we stick a couple of these on it, and let's stick on the xenon container underneath, and the ion drive, we can launch this Allen probe, and it's night time. Perfect. I really hadn't planned this very well, did I? Yeah, so you can extend the panels one at a time. This is what action groups are great for. We just bring them out, and you see as they come out, it says sun exposure 0, energy flow 0, blocked by Kerbin. But let's bring the sun around. We'll time accelerate. The sun shall rise, and suddenly the panels move to start following it. You can take a look in the resources menu. You can see, well, it shows that we have full electrical charge, but it's now telling you that this is generating power. 1.5, 1.94, 1.1. Essentially, this is computing the angle to the sun and figuring out how much power it can produce. Now, under perfect conditions, each of these will produce 2 power units at this distance. But if you can't get them angled perfectly, like here, they'll produce less. Also, as your distance to the sun changes, they will produce more power when they're closer and less power when they're further out. Now, the game doesn't actually do a regular inverse square law. They have the part files basically have a series of distances and powers, and it's not really inverse square, so don't expect reality to work in this case. I'm thinking I might mod that out. But yeah, look, there I am. If I power up the ion drive, it doesn't last very long. On, see up in the resources in the top right corner, turn it on, power drains very quickly. Now, you can run it at, say, partial power. There I'm running at 50% power, and you can see that it's sustaining. Keep bringing that up, and there it's draining. So you're going to need a lot of solar panels to power this thing unless you're traveling very close to the sun. And of course, you notice the thrust from this thing is absolutely minuscule. You can't lift off from a planet with this. Well, okay, I'm sure someone will figure out how to lift off from a planet with this, but you're going to really need large solar cells, and you're going to need a booster stage to get you into space. So let's come back to the vehicle assembly building. Now, what else do we have for offer here? There's also, in the structural one, there is this tiny decoupler, which is very useful for hooking it into the rest of a spacecraft, say. And what we'll do is we'll stick on some more xenon tanks, because more fuel is better. We got our Tony probe coming down, and we'll stick on a battery pack. Battery pack gives us a little bit of buffer so that we can run things after. You know what? Yeah, we don't need the battery pack. Let's stick on the Gigantor solar array. Let's stick it on the front here like that. Can I get it exactly in the middle? I'm not sure I can. In theory, if you could get it to fit exactly in the middle, you would just need one of these. But you know what? Let's just do 2. The reality of the situation is that as you go further from the sun, you're going to need more of these. So why not take advantage of that beforehand? Let's put excess power on. These generate 15, or sorry, these generate 14 each. So, you know, one of these panels alone should be able to power the engine. But as you go further out, your power is going to drop off. So it's good to have a little more, a little more headroom to breathe with. Now, the other things that have been added is in the science menu, you have all these little instruments. Now, it doesn't look like they actually require power. but they do add mass. A good one to have is the accelerometer, because that will tell you just how fast we're accelerating. So I'm just going to zoom in and stick an accelerometer on one side, and what can we stick on the other side? We can stick the thermometer. I think they're all the same mass, so it doesn't really matter. We have a thermometer or the gravioli detector. Let's stick the gravioli detector on here. So we have two instruments on this satellite. There we go. Now we need to, of course, launch it, so we're going to need a launch stage. Let's build out our launch stage ASAP. And we don't really need very much to launch this. Well, we've got our decoupler in place. We're just going to use fuel engine, little engine, and one of the nice new decouplers with the awesome shroud. I wouldn't say awesome because I would be... it's not really awesome. It's really cool. It's super fantastic. It is magnificent. Awesome should really be taking your breath away. You should not be able to speak for for what you are beholding if it is awesome. Really, you know, word awesome being overused, really. No kidding, huh? So now we've got ourselves a very minimal rocket. This will fly into space. Let us use the action groups menu. Action groups menu is what we're going to use for turning things on and off. And so we want to put our solar panels. We're going to stick it on custom 01, which is the button you push when you press the 1. So that will toggle our solar panels. Custom 2, let's use that to turn our ion engine on and off, for example. And custom 3, let's turn on and off our instruments, so we can turn these things on and off at night. So by pushing the 1, 2 and 3 keys, these will turn these instruments on and off. Okay, I think we're ready to fly. Let us launch the Allen probe. It should be easy enough to take this thing into space. Now you'll notice well, I guess it's going up kind of nicely. That was where Tony spent a couple of nights before I went to rescue him. Yeah, then I took him on a suborbital trajectory accidentally. I meant to send him off into deep space, but I screwed up the launch, and he ended up falling back to Earth over the Arctic. And survived, despite not having a parachute. I will show you that video sometime. I might show you it as part of this. Okay, better back off the thrust here. We're just going into space. And now you do not want to deploy your solar panels yet. You see that the electric charge is slowly being drained right now. I think you need... I think the amount of charge you have on board will give you about 10 minutes maybe of life before you open the solar panels. Are these solar panels aren't generating? Yeah, they're not generating anything. And there's no radiothermal generators, so all of the power is coming from the batteries. Okay, now we're starting to get some altitude. I should start arcing over a little. I'm not doing a particularly good job of this because, well, I'm talking at the same time and I'm moving the mouse with my other hand. And how do these things go? There we see. Continuing to head up to altitude. Now with this ion drive, you do not want to be firing this from low Kerbal orbit. Seriously, you will be waiting forever. If you try to plan an ejection maneuver using the orbital maneuver system, using the maneuver node system, it will probably tell you that you need something like 2 hours of burn time to escape the Kerbal sphere of influence. Oh, maybe not that bad, but it takes a really long time, and it starts to become a major problem because as you're firing your engines, you're rotating around the planet. So instead of burning entirely at periaps, you're wasting fuel burning at a higher and higher altitudes, essentially spiraling outwards in a somewhat inefficient manner. And you'll probably get a moon encounter, and you'll be able to take advantage of the gravity, the gravity assist. But really, we all know that that's far from ideal. But even with a simple rocket like this, we can get this thing probably pretty close to an escape trajectory. In fact, I won't be surprised if this gets into an escape trajectory before I'm able to drop the engines, or drop the stage. Of course, I'm coming around the front side, so I guess I'm going to be heading inwards to other planets. Maybe I should try and head towards the new Moho. Or maybe not. I don't know how much Delta V this thing's going to have in the end. I think I really have undershot this a little. I've been too aggressive in turning myself over towards the horizon. Well, it's just wasted fuel. What are you gonna do about it? I'm just switching back and forth. If you get... this is one of the places where the maneuver node system doesn't really help you that much. It's kind of nice if you're trying to circularize your orbit after coasting to apoapse, but if you're just like me and you're kind of burning to pick up altitude, then it doesn't really give you that much assistance in the end. We are 53 kilometers and 2.5 kilometers per second. I suspect that I will not get all the way to interplanetary space. Partly because I'm burning through the atmosphere and wasting all my fuel on fighting against the atmosphere. But we'll see what happens. There we go. So now what I'm going to do is ditch this, press the 1 key to deploy the solar collectors, and press the 3 key, and there... Nope. No, have we got it? I'll just gonna hit the space. There we go. Get this going. Now, you'll notice that even though I have this thing on at full power now, my velocity is still dropping. And that's because this thing is producing a absolutely minuscule amount of thrust. It's producing half a kilonewton, which with the mass of this module, the tanks, the engine, the panels, that works out to 0.4 G. That's approximately 40 centimeters per second, and it's barely helping me out here. But I might be able to get a decent run out of this. We'll see. And of course, you now want to do full time acceleration with this, and we'll see how we go if we manage to get out into interplanetary space. I think we're going to do a pretty good job here, actually. It's nicer if you can actually get all the way to interplanetary space. You see this thing is actually we're starting to recede from this thing relatively quickly. Although the thrust is really tiny, it burns fuel really slowly, and I think you're getting roughly, 3 kilometers per second delta V out to each of these tanks. So that's a pretty good... it's pretty good in the end. The main problem is it's like the Nerva. The Nerva engine is really heavy, but it gives you really good specific impulse. This is like that to the extreme. Between the solar panels and the ion engine, you're getting really, really high efficiency, but you have even smaller thrust. And, it's interesting that if there was something in the game that could use that extra power, it would be more justified. But this one, you're really... The only powerful thing in the game is the ion drive. The next most power-hungry thing, I think, are the floodlights. And a space probe really has no need for floodlights. Unless, you're wanting to light up something. I'm not sure what that would be. Let's look at these things. Yep, we're getting 100% exposure, and we're getting almost perfect light exposure. Having 2 panels is probably the best way to do things, because if they stick out from the side like that, you can always align your spacecraft in such a way that the solar panels can view the sun. If you have them arranged in a star like that other one, they will occlude each other and you'll not get perfect solar power production. They actually have modeled panel occlusion. That means that it's entirely possible for other bits of the spacecraft to hide the panels. Another interesting thing I can show you, once we get out into space, I'll show you. Right now it's pretty important that I get burning, I guess. I say burning, but there is nothing actually burning here because xenon is inert. We're just using the electricity to create an electrical field, and then you're injecting an ionized form of xenon. What you do is you ionize it, inject it in, and then it travels through this grate, picks up electrons again to neutralize its charge, and then it escapes. And in this case, it's escaping about 4 kilometers per second, I guess. In real life, ion engines, they are very power hungry, and you will typically have this level of solar panels to power them. You won't even get this level of thrust. You will be getting thrust measured in grams. They fire for weeks and weeks on end, and they orbit they get into orbit even more slowly. Again, typically what happens is they get pushed into interplanetary space, or they're used for as station keeping thrusters. Station keeping for satellites in orbit is... Oh, there we go. Are we going up or down? That's the question. I guess that's coming down. Guess we'll continue going and see if we can get an encounter with one of our favorite planets. Let's set our target. Our target is not going to be good. Let's set that as the target. Set as target. So we're just going to keep kind of burning in this direction and see how we do. And this is really boring, of course. So yeah, station-keeping thrusters are used in satellites that sit out in orbit, and specifically geostationary orbit is very commonplace for satellites. And with the satellite in geostationary orbit, the Earth is not perfectly spherical, and so the equations of motion are never quite exact. And satellites will drift away from their positions, so they need station-keeping thrusters to push them back in. It's very important with geostationary satellites because all those satellite dishes that people use on their homes? They're all fixed, right? They're not able to track the sky. Well, I'm sure there are people at home with home satellite dishes that track, but the standard ones you get from Sky or Dish, depending upon your country, they point in one direction, and they can point in one direction because of geostationary satellites. But if the satellite wasn't able to adjust its orbit, then it would drift left or right, and eventually it would drift beyond the position that it was supporting. So most geostationary satellites now use ion thrusters to adjust their position. And the thing with the geostationary satellites, or the communication satellites, is they already have these solar panels to power their communication system. So when they need the power for station keeping, they've got it there. They can charge up batteries and then discharge them. It makes a lot of sense. Now we're a little further into the flight, and we're a lot further away from the planet Kerbal, and now you see that the force of our engine is sufficient to overcome the deceleration due to gravity, and we are now actually picking up speed, departing the Kerbal system now, and we're heading down towards the planet, we're heading up initially, but we're heading down towards the planet Moho. In terms of resources, we are not even down through half of our fuel tank, so we're looking pretty solid. We may not be able to get a capture, but we will find out in a little while. So here we are now, it's about 2 hours into the flight. Of course, this has been run at 4 times time acceleration. You can actually see the time is flickering red. That's because the Lagsbane mod means that the physical simulation is actually timing out, so it's actually slowing down my requested time acceleration to something it can manage. Anyway, we're now relatively close to what we should be. We're close to Moho now, and I think it's time for me to throttle back, and we'll coast up and adjust our orbit here. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to add a maneuver node here and line up our orbits. So it's going down, and so of course I need to go down. And so we see, oh, there, see how that flipped around? That's an indication that the nodes are changing. So if I just flip them back, or at least flip them 45 degrees, there. So that's just pretty closely aligned. Right? And now it tells us I'm going to need 849 meters per second. It also tells me my estimated burn time is 32 minutes. Even at 4 times time acceleration, that's almost 8 minutes. Now you can see we're doing our long, half-hour long burn to adjust our inclination. There are silhouetted against the sun. You can see even at 4 times time acceleration, we're only accelerating at maybe 1.5 meters per second. Of course, we still have 452 units of fuel left. That's had plenty of time. One of these xenon fuel tanks is typically enough to keep an ion drive burning for 1 hour. So you get a lot of bang for your buck out of these, even though it takes a really long time. This is a game that really, really rewards the patient. So now we've performed our inclination change, but we still don't have a reasonable close encounter. The map is showing us that we are basically, our closest encounter is on the other side of the sun. We're like 3 million kilometers away. So now what I'm just going to do is adjust my orbit using the maneuver nodes and try to get an encounter. If I don't get anything decent, I'll make another orbit and I'll continue until I get a good close approach with minimal delta V. Okay, after a couple of orbits, I actually do have a relatively close approach. It's 1 million kilometers, but by what I've done is I can create a maneuver node, and I'm doing this at periapse, or apoapse, and I'm just going to adjust this and see if I can make the approach closer. Obviously that isn't working, so I'm going to drag it the other way. As you see, bringing it in brings them closer together. That's starting to look good. 84,000 kilometers, that would be a sphere of influence for some planets. 45,000, just doing this very slowly. You see how you can experiment with these things until you get the match. There we go, we got a match. So again, that was just I got the plane, I got them aligned, and then I made the adjustments bit by bit mostly using this. Now the only problem is it'd be really nice to have that remain up while I'm pushing this. Honestly, I think I'm gonna now accept that maneuver node, and I'll make another correction here later when I'm closer in, or maybe I'll just make a live correction, because 3,000 kilometers, that's a pretty good close approach if you ask me. Maybe we can get a slingshot off it. So the delta V is 117 meters per second, and that's going to take 4 minutes. So let me zip off around there and do that. It's going to take a little while. And yeah, after adjusting my orbit, getting that encounter, of course making a few more changes, we are finally on our encounter with Moho. I managed to get the orbit to pass by this body at about 20 kilometers, which is not bad considering that we've been traveling for 160 days and burning for several hours of game time. This has been incredibly tedious, but yeah, it's a tiny spacecraft. This whole thing weighs less than your 3-man capsule. It's almost about the same weight as a 1-man capsule with parachutes and other stuff attached. But it's a nice thing if you want to build these space probe. They really give you a lot of versatility that you otherwise wouldn't have. Now you see that I've got the gravity sensors on the side. I'm trying to get some reading on the Moho as we pass by. Of course, Moho is retextured, redesigned, and is missing the ginormous bullet hole style mountain. Instead, we just have a kind of brownish cratered object. Oh, and we have a gravity value that makes sense. 0.82, that is too high for me to land using this spacecraft. Even if I could stop using the 8 kilometer, I get like 5 kilometers per second or something delta V. I don't think I've got enough delta V left, enough fuel left to generate that level of delta V. Of course, if I had the patience, I would use the orbital maneuver system to, keep getting gravity accelerations and see if I can bump my way up to Jupiter using the minimum amount of thrust. But if I get the patience to pull that off, it will definitely be another video. Until then, I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.